Yeah.
and some tough decisions or some ways that you leaned into that role as the
Yeah.
president.
One mistake I think a lot of people make is to think that you're just either born a leader or you're not. When in fact, leadership is like anything else. It's a skill,
Mm-hmm.
and there are a bunch of different ways to do it. You know, weren't always trying to seek attention. I think that the thing I try to communicate in the book, and I learned this. I wasn't always, uh, perfect at it. Um, Number one was realizing that the most important thing a leader does is they set a tone in terms of culture of
Mm-hmm.
a team, whether the team is a basketball team or a business or an administration. And so, what are the values around which you are organizing yourselves? One of the things I'm most proud about during my administration is we never had a scandal. You know, uh, and the reason was that I felt it was really important if you have been elected to serve people that that's why you're there. And we
Mm-hmm.
were very clear to everybody who was serving, look, if you're here because of something other than service, then this is probably not a good fit for you. Uh, if you're interested in the attention, well, you know what? Right now we got a job to do. So I think being clear about what your values are as an organization, that's part of leadership. The second thing, and this I know you can relate to because there's a direct analogy in basketball or any team sport, um, is figuring out how do you help the people around you succeed,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
And so one of the things I learned in the White House and in my campaign, I'll use a campaign story as a better example. I would not have won the presidency if I had not won Iowa,
Mm-hmm.
because that was the first big test, the first state where you have an election contest back in 2007, 2008. And, it was 98% white, a lot of rural voters. People didn't think that somebody of my profile could win that state. And the reason we won is not because I was the best candidate. The reason we won was because I trusted this amazing staff uh, who knew Iowa, who were great organizers. They in turn hired a bunch of young people, many of them fresh out of college or had didn't have a huge lot of experience, but we trusted them to go into these little towns, talk about what we were about, talk about healthcare and jobs, but also listen to people, find out what they believed in, what they cared about. And at the end of the day, the reason I won was because we had empowered this whole team of people to go out, and they made relationships and figured out what our message should be and brought people to the polls, or in that case, the caucuses. And I think that's the second thing about leadership that I always try to emphasize. If you can figure out how to empower the other folks on your team so
Mm-hmm.
they're doing great, that's good for you. And by the way, they'll feel good about your leadership because they're seeing that you're invested in their success. And I think the mistake a lot of folks make is to think being a leader is how do I dominate and stay on top of
Right.
those folks.
Right.
Uh, and if you have that kind of approach, your organization, whatever it is not going to be as good as it should be. And by the way, you're not going to have the same, uh, you know, tight bonds so that when inevitably something goes wrong, you got other people to pick each other up.
100%. You said surrounding yourself with good people that have similar mindset in terms of what is the ultimate goal, and
Right.
to your point, the opportunity to have that shared experience of success, and it's not being all about you is
Right.
I got some construction going on around here, so hopefully you can still hear me.
That's all right. I can hear you fine.
But yeah, that's important. I feel like every time you see us on the floor celebrating championships, and even if you don't win, there's still that respect of the people that's from your right and your left that you get to go to war with.
That's
When they look at
exactly
the top and they can see that authentic approach that you just mentioned around. Do you have their best interest, even if you don't agree all the time, even if there's some hard times, hard conversations, that you always
That's
have
exactly
that sense of, we call it trust, care, and commitment. I learned that back at Davidson when Coach McKill used to say, like, you can have all type of tough spots and disagreements and growth, but at the end of the day, that authenticity of looking out for each other, knowing that you don't achieve anything successful by yourself, you got to live that out. And so
no, that's exactly right. I mean, probably the book ends with the raid to get Bin Laden, and I kind of lay out step by step how that happened. And when you look at all the moving parts and the hundreds of people who, under complete secrecy, had to operate at the highest levels and trust each other, everybody from the intelligence folks who figured out meticulously the detective work to figure out where he was, to the Navy SEALs who built a whole compound just like in Abbottabad, Pakistan, and practiced and trained. It's a military affair. Go back, the canine, and to the diplomats who had to manage the fallout. You look, and it's a perfect example of what you described, and that's part of why I end the book, because I want people to see when government works, when any important thing happens, it is because we're doing it as a group, collectively, with a shared sense of mission. And when that falls apart, I don't care how much talent, how much money, it will not work. Things will break down. And that's, I think, one of the biggest themes of the book, because that applies to America as a whole. Right?
100%.
And we're in a moment where we're really divided right now. And it's just really important for us to remind ourselves, when we send a man to the moon, or we defeat, the Axis powers in World War II and defeat fascism, or any of the seminal moments of American history. There may have been a leader who helped make that happen, but it's thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, who are involved in that success, and that's, I think, has to be where we get to. That's why I called this book A Promised Land.
Mm-hmm.
We're not there, just like Exodus and coming out of bondage. We're right now in the midst of that wandering, 40 years in the desert, and it may be it's our kids or our grandkids who get there. But what I know is that if we're to make progress as a country, it's going to be because we get past some of these divisions that have in some cases been around for hundreds of years.
I got to bring it back to the beautiful First Lady Michelle Obama. I know everybody sees the polished product when you come out and you give your speeches, or when you have that stature about you. I always have this kind of imagination that right before you come out, like you and Michelle just had some real serious conversation. She gave you some good wisdom right before you turn the corner, because that's my experience with Aisha. That's what I know she keeps it real and always kind of there's a little gem of some kind of idea that I wasn't even thinking about. I'm like, you know what, you're right. I need to implement that into what I'm doing. Can you kind of maybe give us an example of maybe a hard decision that Michelle was instrumental in helping you land it in the right spot, or somewhere that she influenced the way that you presented yourself?
I think we've been married almost 30 years now, and so she's so woven up in, like, I don't even know, well, did I used to be like that? Or,
right.
Has she just been training me all this time, so now I'm this way? It's interesting, though, a lot of times with Michelle, in really stressful moments, the thing that she's really good at is actually making me laugh. Like I write about how right before the Democratic National Convention speech in 2004, which, I'm doing the math real quickly, but I guess you were, in 8th grade or something, ninth grade, whatever that was, right? So you don't remember this. But this was my first big national speech. It was really kind of the coming out party nationally. So it was a big deal. And it was sort of a surprise that I had been selected. I wasn't even in the Senate yet. I was still in the state legislature. It was very rare for somebody like me to get this, millions of viewers. And so I'd written this speech, and I knew it was good, but I'm feeling a little bit like, man, I wonder how this is going to go.
Right.
So she comes up, I'm about to be announced, and she comes up to me and she looks at me, she squeezes my hand, and she leans over real close, and she says, "Honey, don't screw it up." and I start cracking up, right? And that was perfect. That's what I needed.
Right.
If she had said, "Oh, honey, I'm so proud of you," I would have still been a wreck. But
right, 100%.
When she said it like that, then I
got you out your own way.
And that was exactly what was needed. So, look, she's been such a powerful partner for me in so many ways. The most important things she's done that helped me become a better president was reminding me of my other responsibilities. Because, her insisting that I was going to be home for dinner at 6:30. Her attitude was, look, we're starting dinner because I'm not going to have these girls waiting for you and wondering is Daddy. Dinner's served at 6:30. I would advise you to be home at 6:30. Mm-hmm. And so I just set up my schedule so that no matter how busy I was, unless there was a genuine emergency, I was home at 6:30, had dinner, read to the girls, helped them with their homework. And then if I had to go back to the office to do the work, obviously I had the advantage. I was living above the store, so I didn't have to commute. But, her anchoring me in that way, that actually made me a better president because it reminded me, all right, this is what families around the country are looking for.
Right.
How can they spend time with their families? How can their kids live a good life? And so it was a continuous sense of focusing on what's important. And that made me, I think, a more compassionate, more effective president. And the other thing that I think she did, she teases me because I'm more she calls me the fact guy, that like I always got facts in my head. And
I'm trying to solve everything.
Yeah, and I'm constantly, reading stuff and analyzing, and I got data, and she understands the world more emotionally.
Uh-huh.
And I think that there were times during my presidency where I had gotten the policy right. I had figured out, all right, this is how we're going to get health care done, or this is what we need to do to deal with climate change, but I was communicating to the public in such a kind of dry way that people they just couldn't connect.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting. During the campaign, I was telling stories and connecting with people, but once I'm in the White House, now I got to be serious all the time, and I've got to have these formal press conferences, and I've got to give all these statistics, and she was always good about saying, hey man, why don't you tell a story that people can relate to? Why don't you, instead of having a formal press conference, why don't you do something fun that people might actually want to watch? Right?
Did she tell you to come on this IG? Is that
absolutely. But that kind of when I talk to younger people now, a lot of my staff, they're coming to the age where they're starting to get married, have kids, et cetera, or they're thinking about it. They've been with somebody for a while. They're wondering, should they take the plunge? And what I always, what I say to them is, look, nothing's better than having a partner who is complementary to you, right? That sees things you don't, that has you covered on some blind spots, that can teach you something. Now that means that there's probably going to be a little more friction, because if they're strong-minded and they've got opinions, they're not always going to mesh. And I describe in the book the fact that Michelle and I are temperamentally different. She's got a strong personality, so do I. There are times where we're butting heads, but I am better because I've got someone who has strengths that I don't have, that sees things I don't see. And I would like to think that she feels the same way. And that, I think, has been one of the foundation stones of our relationship.
Couldn't say that any better. That complimentary piece that kind of gets you out your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And if you have that mutual respect and you're on the same level where you value each other's opinion, and you try to integrate that into how you're seeing things and how you react. And to your point, over the course of time, you might get confused. You don't know if it's your thoughts, her thoughts, y'all's both thoughts. Like it does catch you off guard, and it's the best thing in the world. So just the way that you demonstrated that, again, through all the stresses of the highest office in the land, like that to me is one of the most amazing accomplishments, and the way that you've kind of inspired, relationships of all kinds all across, our country and the world. It means a lot. So just encouraging you guys on your journey.
Well, no,
we appreciate
that.
That.
But look, the other thing it teaches you, which becomes even more important when you've got a daughter, as a man, you've got to have confidence in seeing the strength of your wife and partner, rather than wanting them to make themselves small to pump you up. And one of the great blessings of being married to Michelle is the example she set. Now I don't have to worry that Malia and Sasha are ever going to kind of dim their light, because somehow that's supposed to be the role that they play, because that's just not that's not what I want them their lives to be. I want that light to shine, and I want them to find people in their lives that love that light and love to see that shine.
Absolutely. I'm going to bring it kind of towards some current events in terms of like we just went through an election. Hopefully we'll have a peaceful change of power, and I think with all that's happened over the last year, and that's kind of been exposed in the conversations that have been happening that need to continue. How would you advise us as citizens, no matter where, what walk of life you're in, to kind of continue this pursuit of social and racial justice in America. And I say that in terms of, we don't have, loud protests, every week. We don't have the news coverage as much as we might like to. But I think we all have a voice and a platform, and whether that's, through social media, whether that's through our families, our workplaces, what have you. How would you advise us, going into 2021 to continue these important conversations that we need to have, to not, lose the momentum that I think we've gained over this last year, no matter how hard, some of these things have happened?
Well, look, it's something I spend a lot of time thinking about, and I write in the book about how after my election, and I saw this coming and I was worried about it, I think there were a lot of people who felt like, whoo, we're done.
Right.
Barack's in office now, change is here. And we had a big financial crisis, and we had 2 wars, and you had a big chunk of the Republican Party that were going to refuse to work with me. And, so no one event like an election settles things. Democracy is this constant process, and you're never done. And so I was really, I felt so optimistic this summer after the tragedy, as heartbroken as I was, to see the response to George Floyd. I was, we talked about how proud I was of how young people engaged, got involved, people from all walks of life. How proud I was of you and some of the other high-profile athletes who, were very clear in their convictions and expressed them in ways that, didn't leave any doubt in terms of the demands of justice, and then translated that into actually voting and, really specific organizational efforts. But you're absolutely right to now say, okay, what's the next step? Well, number one, I hope people know just right away, anybody who's listening in Georgia, there's another election coming up, special, the runoff election after the Senate election. And man, because that'll determine who is in charge of the Senate. Want to do has to go through Congress. It has to go through the Senate to win those 2 seats with people who want to pursue voting rights legislation or criminal justice reform legislation. That is important. So pay attention to that. Make sure you're registered and make sure you vote. The other thing that I've spoken about a lot, and you're absolutely right to say everybody can be involved in this, is so much of the change people aspire to after the George Floyd tragedy happens at the local level and not the federal level. And so the mayor of cities appoints typically the police chief. There may be an elected school board, and they have meetings. There are negotiations between police and City Hall about what does their contract look like, and how are police held or not, how are district attorneys or state's attorneys are approaching cases, and how do they think about diversion, for example, of nonviolent opposed to incarceration. A lot of that stuff is happening at the local level. And that's where just a pretty small number of individuals, a group of churches, it's harder sometimes to affect what happens in Washington, but in your local community, you can actually show up at these meetings and ask questions and promote this kind of work. And one of the things that we're doing with My Brother's Keeper, which you and Aisha supported, our goal, and then we started after the Trayvon Martin death as a response to make sure that we're getting to some of the root causes of racism and structural injustice. One of the things that a lot of these MBK communities have focused on is putting together handbooks and manuals and training programs and policy recommendations for cities. And in some cases, we've asked, one of the things that we did after the George Floyd murder was to insist on cities taking a pledge that they were going to move this process forward. And hundreds of cities have actually signed up. And so that's one way. They can go to Keeper Committee, start one, but that's a place where you can immediately start getting reform and improve the system.
I love the actionable items, specific concrete ways that we can participate, and how important information over the pre-election season, and obviously just a new energy around how young people can influence the outcomes of these elections. And like you said, Georgia, to get plugged in there, keep that conversation bottom so you can get that information there and sign up. I got one last question for you before we get out of here. I know you got a busy schedule and I got to get back to training, but I got your book here, and obviously the big boys. It's your first term. It's an unbelievable picture. I don't know where you posed for this at. You look good. But
they didn't do any touch up on the gray though.
Yeah, well,
no, it's distinguished.
The fade is nice. I saw Spice Adams in here talking about the fade is nice. So I'm trying to, that's goals right there. So
there you go.
Just what would be one takeaway that you want people to know from the book, and why you wanted to put the time